Syracuse Basketball is on the recruiting trail.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are going over Syracuse basketball recruiting. We're a little bit overdue on this one. We're going to talk about two prospects, mainly Ryder Frost and Matthew Gilhool, and then other recruiting buzz on the Hill, including some players who might be taking visits to Syracuse. Five-star Chris Cenac, anyone? Kiyan Anthony, another official visit potentially. We're going to go over that here on today's podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We are a little bit overdue for a Syracuse basketball recruiting update. We've talked a lot about Syracuse football and their recruiting highs and lows. It's time to talk a little bit about basketball because I think it's been a few weeks. So let's touch on it. And let's start off with a fast rising four-star prospect in Ryder Frost. He is 6'6", 200 pounds. He is a guard / forward, whatever you want to call him, from Beverly, Massachusetts. 24/7 Sports composite, 4-star recruit. And he took an official visit to Syracuse basketball just last weekend. And the source on that is, well, himself. You could see it on his Instagram page. I wasn't aware that he was going to be taking a visit until I saw it on his Instagram. Pretty good source, if you asked me. So Ryder Frost took an official visit to Syracuse last weekend. The other thing to note about him is that he got a scholarship offer from Syracuse in late May, and he said right afterwards that he wanted to visit Syracuse. So this is one of those things where there's clearly mutual interest between the two. And offers have really started to come in for Ryder Frost from big powers or medium powers. The point being is that it wasn't long ago when Ryder Frost was mainly a 3-star recruit, not on many schools' radar, but he is really a fast-rising player, as I have said repeatedly already here on this podcast. Some other schools that have already offered him as well include Miami, Boston College. I think Wake Forest is in the mix as well, Wisconsin, Notre Dame. So there's ACC competition, Power 4 competition for this kid in Ryder Frost. But Syracuse is the only one of those schools, to my knowledge, that got an official visit with Ryder Frost. And I do think that is pretty significant because the only one that I know of, to my knowledge, is Harvard. But that was back, I think last October was when he visited Harvard. And let's be honest, I think Syracuse could beat out Harvard when it comes to basketball. Now, if you're talking about academics, we got another problem here. I went to Syracuse. I love Syracuse, love Newhouse, but we're not competing with Harvard in terms of what type of intelligence or SAT scores that they're going to get from certain kids. But if we're talking about basketball, I think Syracuse can win out against a school like Harvard. But again, he didn't have many other Power 4 offers other than he didn't really have any other Power 4 offers. It was mainly just Harvard and a few other schools that were giving a kid the look. He visited them. And well, now I would say Harvard might be probably out of the running just simply because look at the other schools that are offering the kid, as I have already said. In an interview with Patrick O'Brien, Frost described himself as a quote unquote a high IQ versatile wing that can stretch the floor with my shooting, guard multiple positions with other wings and bigs, and rebound and get out and transition. So this is someone who sounds like a 3-and-D type of player who can also handle the ball particularly well, which makes sense because you're a 6'6" guard. You got to be able to handle the ball at least a little bit. I like it. I like that prototype. You can never have enough 3-and-D players. Shooting is very, very important. Notice how there was the Jack Goki kid, the guy who hit 10 threes against Kentucky on Oakland in the NCAA tournament, I believe he got from some NBA team a offer or two-way deal, something after the draft. He didn't go drafted, but he is definitely picked up by an NBA team because he can shoot. And a guy like Judah Mintz, for example, who has yet to sign a contract, to my knowledge, with an NBA team, who didn't go drafted, he can't really shoot well. So shooting, very, very, very important. So if Ryder Frost can shoot, he can make it. And Syracuse, we can't say no to shooters because we need more. And obviously, this is a class of 2025 kid. Forgot to mention that. This is a class of 2025 recruit. You can never have enough shooting, so I like it. I know that I said Harvard is probably out of the running for Ryder Frost, but at the same time, the On3 prediction meter does have Harvard as the favorite, but only at 7%, and I would say that probably hasn't been updated yet. The On3 prediction meter is a very good tool to use as far as where recruits are going to go, but it's all about when the machine is actually updated. If it's not updated, then you can't really take too much away from it. I don't even know if at the time when Sadiq White announced his decision, he's the only Syracuse 2025 recruit so far. But when Sadiq White announced his decision, I don't think he was in the top 4 or in the top 3 on that prediction meter. So the point being is that it's all about when it is actually updated. I would say by the next update, I would not be surprised if Syracuse is the favorite for Ryder Frost, given that he took an official visit to Syracuse and has yet to officially visit other schools that I mentioned have recently given scholarship offers. So I would keep a close eye on Ryder Frost. I don't have a timetable as to when he is going to make his decision. There's still plenty of time to make one, but I would not be surprised with the next update. I don't know when the next update is, but whenever the next update is, if Syracuse becomes the favorite to land him because they got him on campus. Now coming up, a player who kind of fell out of the radar. I think a lot of us thought that Syracuse was no longer in the running for this kid, but it turns out Syracuse is still very much in the running for 4-star big man Matthew Gilhool. It's one thing to watch baseball on TV. That at times can get pretty boring, even though I actually watched a little bit of baseball yesterday on TV. But it's just not the same as an in-person experience. And I'm looking forward to actually watching the Mets this summer because they're actually now in the hunt for the wild card. I didn't think that at the beginning of the season they would be. I shredded them numerous times on the radio, but hey, they're in contention, so I'm pretty excited to watch them. And one way I'll be using, or one app that I'll be using to watch them, is certainly Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets, and all you have to do is go to Gametime and search the team you want to see of your choosing. It can be MLB or any league for that matter, and ticket options will appear right away. My favorite part is the all-in pricing feature. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the streaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Welcome back, everyone, into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. On today's show, it's Syracuse Basketball Recruiting. We just talked about a 4-star guard/forward in Ryder Frost. He recently took an official visit to Syracuse, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Orange are considered the front runner whenever the prediction meter for On3 actually gets updated. I would not be surprised if Syracuse is considered the front runner. They're the only ones of the big schools that have gotten an official visit so far. But now it's time to move on to Matthew Gilhool, a 6'10", 205-pound forward or center from Elizabeth, Pennsylvania. He is a consensus 4-star recruit, and he's rated as high as top 75 in the country on Rivals. He has taken one official visit to Syracuse. That was back in September, and 2 more unofficial visits. So this was someone that has always had interest in Syracuse, and Syracuse has always had interest in him. 2025 big man Matthew Gilhool. Now, a few months ago, the top 3 schools for Matthew Gilhool were Syracuse and Penn State. Those were the 3 most active schools for Matthew Gilhool. It seemed like he was going to land with one of those 3. But then, Mike Hopkins was fired from Washington, so Washington not really in the mix anymore. And then the lead recruiter for Syracuse on Matthew Gilhool was GMAC, Gerry McNamara. He was the lead recruiter for Matthew Gilhool. Of course, now he is coaching at Sienna. And with all due respect to Sienna, Matthew Gilhool is how should I say this nicely? Matthew Gilhool is going to go to a Power 4 school if he so chooses. He is good enough to be able to play in the Power 4. He is a consensus 4-star recruit, so he's probably not going to follow GMAC to Sienna. But the point being with that is, it kind of left some doubt as to whether or not Syracuse was still going to pursue him, because Gerry McNamara was the lead recruiter for him, and now he's gone to Sienna. Afterwards, Gilhool himself said that his recruitment was wide open. It was originally just those 3, it appeared, and then he said that it was wide open. However, in a recent update, Matthew Gilhool said himself that the schools he is hearing most from now, so this is updated now, Alabama, Michigan, Penn State, and Syracuse. So from Matthew Gilhool himself, he says that Syracuse is still very much in contact and in the running for Matthew Gilhool. Now, notably, Washington was not on that list, so it appears that they might have backed off recruiting, or maybe Gilhool said that he's not going to go there. Syracuse is still on it. Penn State's still on it. You can add in Michigan and Alabama for his services as well. As far as his scouting report, this is what On3 had to say about him, and I'm going to paraphrase this. Basically, Matthew Gilhool has all the tools to be successful at the college level. As far as NBA upside, I'm not really sure. It's too far to really, because he is a class of 2025 kid. But in terms of moving up to college, he has all the tools. He can shoot. He can push the ball up the floor. He's a good shot blocker. He can slide his feet on defense. So overall, he's a pretty good all-around player. The one thing they said about him that he needs to work on is strength. This is someone that needs to grow into his body, which, I'll be completely honest, I think is a really good thing. If that is the main concern, strength, obviously you want your players to be strong, but he's still got another year of high school. And wherever he commits, he's going to have a full summer to train at that college to build up his strength. And of course, he might not be stronger than the guys he's going to be going up against, but at least he can kind of level the playing field. It's very difficult for an 18-year-old to walk into college and be a contributor right off the bat, even if you are a consensus 4-star recruit. Not many freshmen make an immediate impact in college. Usually they either have to redshirt or they're coming off the bench. But when it comes to all the, I don't want to say it in a harsh tone, but in terms of all the quote unquote issues that you can have if you are a recruit coming into college, I would say that strength is probably the easiest one to make up, because that's just, you can go into the weight room, change your diet. If it was something like shooting, it's very hard to develop a jump shot. It's hard. It's hard to become a better ball handler. Being a better defender is really all about if you can get better at your lateral quickness, your timing. Those are tougher issues, I think, to overcome than strength. So if there's any concern that I would say I would want my prospects to have coming in, I would say it's probably strength. That's probably the easiest to be able to, quote unquote, overcome. As far as whether or not Matthew Gilhool is going to come to Syracuse, the On3 prediction meter, which is what I'm using for these percentages, they say that Syracuse has a 65% chance of landing Matthew Gilhool. Granted, I do not know the last time that was updated. I think it's been sitting there for a long, long time. I would say it's still possible that Syracuse lands Matthew Gilhool, but I think by the time we get another prediction meter out for him, if Syracuse isn't the favorite, or Syracuse may still be the favorite, but they may not be an overwhelming favorite, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're not the favorite entirely. It's certainly possible. I don't know exactly what it'll be. I just think that it is good news overall that even though Gerry McNamara was the lead recruiter for Syracuse and he went to Sienna, and Matthew Gilhool then said that his recruitment was wide open, it is a good thing that Syracuse is still in touch for him. So, having said that, this is one of the big men that Syracuse is targeting in the class of 2025. They are targeting one more, and the player that they already got in Sadiq White, you could consider a big man. He could play forward, power forward. I remember when I had Sam Kaiser on a couple months ago. He is the main guy who runs 24/7 high school hoops on Twitter, and he now works for League Ready Recruiting. I asked him, is Syracuse targeting any big man really? And he said, really, aside from Gilhool, no. But now it appears they are going after two potential big men. So maybe it's not portal hopping next year, portal hunting next year for a big man. So coming up, we're going to talk about the other recruiting buzz on the Hill, including that big man in Chris Cenac, a 5-star recruit, maybe is coming to Syracuse. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Welcome back, everyone, into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and on today's show, we are going over Syracuse basketball recruiting. Long overdue for this podcast. We talked about Ryder Frost. We talked about Matthew Gilhool, two potential Syracuse two targets for Syracuse. Maybe they're going to commit to Syracuse. I don't know, but it seems like there is mutual interest between those prospects and Syracuse. So now let's get into other recruiting chatter on the Hill. This is going to be just kind of brief summaries of a few players that I shouted out here, none of which, or most of these guys I'm going to shout out, I haven't really talked about too much. So a guy like Tyler Jackson, for example, I'm not really going to talk about. I've talked about him enough. First of all, I want to give a shout out to Neil Adler from Inside the Loud House, a frequent guest here on the podcast. He is the source for a lot of the information that I'm getting here on this podcast. So thank you, Neil Adler, if you're watching or listening. As far as who is committed so far in the class of 2025, by now, if you don't know, well, here's a reminder. Syracuse has Sadiq White, a 6'9", 5-star composite forward. Nothing has changed on that end. He is still a 5-star composite player. and he is still committed to Syracuse. So all is peachy and good with Sadiq White and Syracuse. So good. They still got one in the boat so far. Now, as far as players that may take a visit or may take another visit, I do want to start off talking a tiny bit about Kiyan Anthony, obviously the son of Carmelo Anthony, a 4-star guard who might become a 5-star pretty soon. He might visit Syracuse again. He indicated he visited Syracuse last October officially. On3 has predicts that Syracuse will land Kiyan Anthony, so that is the good news. I know there was also talk about him visiting other schools like Ohio State and Indiana, but he might visit Syracuse again, which again is it feeds into that prediction that Syracuse and Kiyan Anthony could very much happen. I would say more probable than not. Am I going to guarantee Kiyan Anthony is coming to Syracuse? No. I can't do that, but I will say, in my opinion, based on everything that I am reading and that I have heard, I would say it is more probable than not he ends up at Syracuse. That's what I will say on that. Now, moving on, I teased this guy a few times here. Chris Cenac, I may have discussed him a while back here on the podcast, but he is 6'10", 5-star center from New Orleans. On3 actually ranks him as the number 6 overall player in the class. If that sounds familiar to you, that makes sense because Donnie Freeman is the number 6 overall player over on ESPN in the class of 2024. So a pair of number 6s potentially. Now, he is from New Orleans, a 5-star player, as I have said, 6'10" center. Syracuse gave him an offer back in early June. And when that offer came in, it was a late offer for someone who's really, really good. I was obviously excited. He's a really, really good player. So, of course, I want Syracuse to give him an offer. But at the same time, I think most people, including myself, were like, yeah, it just seems like one of those offers and you see if he's interested or not. But chances are he's probably looking elsewhere. And it's not because he's too good of a recruit. I mean, Syracuse just got a 5-star in Donnie Freeman. It's just because you're getting late in the race for him. It's late in the race. So it's kind of hard to compete with those schools that have already built those relationships with Chris Cenac. So I was skeptical. Sorry, I can't really speak. I was skeptical of Syracuse's chances of landing him. And to be honest with you, I still don't think they're going to land him. But at the same time, they could be scheduling a visit. There is buzz that Syracuse and Chris Cenac could be working on a potential visit. And if you can get the guy to visit campus, all of a sudden you're in the hunt. Once again, I'm getting this from Neil Adler at Inside the Loud House, so shout out to him. There could be a visit in the works between Syracuse and the 5-star big man, Chris Cenac. So you get that visit, all bets are off. All of a sudden, you are very much in the hunt. Right now, he's from New Orleans, Louisiana kid. LSU is considered the favorite, and then Houston is right behind them last time I checked. But hey, you never know if you can get the kid on campus to visit. Moving on to Josiah Sanders, a 24/7 sports composite 4-star point guard. He has official visits scheduled for Tennessee and Colorado. He might also visit Wisconsin, Minnesota, and UCLA. But Syracuse may also get a visit with Josiah Sanders, but it's going to be very competitive. He is from Colorado, so no surprise that Colorado is in the mix. Tennessee also has that official visit. He's a 4-star point guard. Again, it's about building relationships. I'm not even sure if Syracuse has offered him because I looked on several recruiting sites to see if Syracuse actually gave him an offer. I don't know if they actually have offered him, but if they get him on campus, I'm assuming they're going to offer him. He's good enough to be offered for what it's worth. So maybe Syracuse has a shot with Josiah Sanders, but it seems like if I were to rank in order of the 3 players that I just mentioned, Kiyan Anthony is probably the strongest chance to come to Syracuse, followed by Chris Cenac, which I would say is still probably a low probability, and then Josiah Sanders, which If they can't get him on an official visit or they can't get him on a visit, then I don't see it happening. But still, keep him on your radar. It's certainly possible that Syracuse and Josiah Sanders get a visit in order. Other potential visits that could happen soon include 4 stars Arcaden Lewis, Sean Above, and Keyshawn Tillery. Once again, all 4-star players. Overall, in the class of 2025, Syracuse has sent out a ton of offers. There seems to be mutual interest between Syracuse and these kids that they're offering, which is good. They already have someone in the boat, which is very nice on July 2nd, especially because it's Sadiq White, maybe the best defender in the class of 2025 and a composite 5-star recruit. So they already have him in the boat, which is fantastic. When I look at how this class might shake out, I already said that I think that Syracuse is going to get at least 3 players. I think you're looking at, well, they have Sadiq White, I think Kiyan Anthony, and then 1 more. So it could be Ryder Frost, Matthew Gilhool, Tyler Jackson. It could be 1 or it could be 2 or even all 3 of those guys. But my point being, I think if I were to make a comparison for this class, I would say it has the potential to be like the class of 2022, which had 6 recruits in it. But I believe that if Syracuse were to land a deep class, that it's not going to just be deep on quantity. It's going to be deep on quality. They're not just going to get 6 players, 4 of which will be 4 stars, but only 1 high-end 4-star, which was Judah Mintz. They might get a 5-star in Sadiq White and 3 other medium to high-end 4-star recruits like Tyler Jackson, like Kiyan Anthony, like a guy like Matthew Gilhool, maybe a lower end like a Ryder Frost, but Ryder Frost might not be a low-end 4-star recruit for long. He keeps rising in those rankings as we speak. So I'm pretty pleased with Syracuse basketball and their hunt for the next great Orange basketball players. Hopefully they can start getting some commitments soon, but at the very least, there's mutual interest. So I'm optimistic. It's July 2nd. They haven't played any games next season. They got someone in the boat. I am optimistic about Syracuse's 2025 recruiting class. So that is it for today's podcast. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. Tell all your friends. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on those notifications so you know right away when I am dropping the next podcast. And everyone, have a great rest of your evening. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your morning. Whenever you are watching this, everyone, take care.